War does not determine who is right, only who is left. Bertrand Russell. All right. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. All right, folks. Well, first and foremost, looks like I managed to get here a little bit more timely than I did yesterday. However, still working on that whole being on time thing. It was funny. I was actually thinking about my own words yesterday as I was late to take my son to his jujitsu class. And I was like, I said, I was like, come on. Cause I told him, I was like, hey, go get your shoes on. And when you tell a child to go and do something because you're trying to get somewhere or do something, it's a timeline, right? Two things happen. Number one, you have to usually tell them more than once. Number two, whatever they need to do to get ready, if it's like put on their shoes, if putting on your shoes is like a 2-minute task for a child, it's like 4 minutes. It's like twice as long, maybe even longer sometimes, right? Because they're like, all right, I'm gonna go do this thing, and then they get sidetracked. They're like, oh, shiny object. And then you're like, hey, did I tell you? So we ended up being late, which partially was my fault yesterday, but it was funny because I was just like, I was thinking about it and I was like, man, I just said this earlier, and here I am today. Right. Today, of course, being yesterday. Um, anyway, let's see. The volume is pretty low. Let's see. There's not much. I don't know what to do about that one. Let me see here. Um, hmm. I don't know. Because I don't have any volume control buttons for the feed. Let's see here. Everything looks like it's correct. So, yeah, I'm getting feedback from the audience here that the audio is low. Um, I don't, I don't know what to do about that. I'm not sure. Like all the settings here that I have at my disposal appear correct. So let me take a look here. I can, hmm, I don't know. I can see where, let's see here. Is it, hmm, give me a second, folks, as I try to figure this out. See if we've got some other settings, something here. I kind of see where maybe like, it's got an audio control bar here, and I can see where it looks like it's kind of low. I've never used this particular bar. I just happened to click on it now. But okay, yes, I will take low volume over no volume. Yes, I that's fair. Um, does that help any at all? I turned this volume up, but I don't know if that's going to do anything for the volume there. Doesn't look like I'm seeing much of a change in any of the meters that I can look at. So, um, okay. So it says good must have been on my end. Okay. Okay. We'll go with it. I appreciate it. I appreciate the audience letting me know. Like, hey, we got a problem here. Like earlier, the audio wasn't on at all. So I'll keep an eye out. Just let me know, folks, if there's an issue, and we'll do our best to overcome any issues. So at any rate, it's just funny. I thought it was kind of interesting, just that I talked about it yesterday, and then like had that incident happen. So today, well, we've got things are heating up, and by heating up, I mean really heating up in Iran and Israel. Now, here's the thing: I don't consider foreign policy my wheelhouse. So I generally try not to talk about it. I generally try not to come out and say anything, declarative and like, yeah, this is totally what's happening, or this is, I can make some general commentary because I am personally anti-war. My position is that we should do our best to avoid conflict, right? And that means from an individual level all the way up to geopolitical, right? I think that is the position that I take. The reason why should be relatively obvious, but if it's at an individual level, right? If we can avoid fighting each other, physically fighting each other, that's always a good thing, right? Sometimes, people might need to take a couple punches. It's fine. I get that. I'm not saying it's never, a reason. How do I want to say it? I don't want to say that it's, that conflict and fighting never has its place. There is a time and a place for it. However, I like to say the more that we can avoid that, the better off we are altogether. On an individual level, that means, maybe somebody doesn't get beat up and have their ego bruised. Maybe they don't end up dead, right? That's always a possible outcome. And then, of course, it only escalates from there. When you start getting into nations that get into conflicts, well, then you always are going to have civilians. And then, as somebody who is anti-war, that makes it even more frustrating and aggravating for people like me, because when I look at it, I say, okay, well, if two nations must go to war, can we limit it to the combatants? Right. And that becomes a challenge because, you know, sometimes nations, their civilians are participating in the war in the sense that maybe they're producing things that are necessary for that country. And so then, of course, their opponents are going to look to strike that. So you always get these civilian casualties. But more importantly, is and this may sound weird, but more importantly to me is the justification for civilian casualties. Because so long as we keep justifying it, then it keeps happening. And when people justify it, I think when you justify an action, what you end up getting is a worse version of that action. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. If we were to say like put it this way, if it was generally the consensus that killing civilians was awful, terrible, and should always be avoided at all cost. If like we were just like, and it was generally the consensus that it was acceptable to have a very serious scrutiny every time a civilian is killed, then I think we would end up seeing fewer civilians killed. So it's that attitude that I think is really, really problematic. And, I see it all the time because people will say, like, they'll say, well, you know, civilian casualties, war is hell. And my argument is always, you ever notice that war is hell tends to be what people say when they're justifying civilian casualties. Like, you don't really see it too often with, okay, well, all these soldiers went and they were killed, war is hell. I mean, we say that too, but I think if you look at the greater instant the greater quantity of instances, you will find it's generally said of civilians. So I'll give you an example. So from an anti-war perspective, not talking about Iran, and we'll get into that Iran and Israel in just a second here. But if you go back to World War II, when the nuclear bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, um, after the fact, in conversations thereafter, people will constantly say, well, war is hell. We had to do this and they justify it, so on and so forth. Right. And so I look at it and I say, well, yes, war is hell. But in this particular case, war is hell happened to hit civilians in great numbers. And people say one of two things. They'll go, yeah, well, these civilians weren't just so innocent. They were producing this and that. And I'm like, yes, that's because that's their country. That's kind of what they do. And they didn't really have a whole lot of other options. Right. And then number two, the other thing that people say is, well, what was our other option? To send a bunch of troops in for them to die? Yes. Because if war is hell, then perhaps war is hell should be that for soldiers before citizens. This is my big frustration with this whole war is hell is that it's used to justify civilian deaths. But then when you suggest that maybe we tip the balance from civilian deaths to more combatants, then people are like, whoa, whoa, wait a minute. That's just a terrible idea. And it's there's no easy answer because then people could come back and say, well, if we kill all our soldiers, then we have nobody to defend. I get it. But I'm just talking about from an anti-war perspective. I look at it and I say, war as hell should be we should in a more just world, we would see that phrase being used regarding combatants more so than regarding civilians. But I think it's flipped. So that's just kind of my position on that. So I'm like I said, I'm not really a like I'm not like a Dave Smith or somebody else who can just rattle off, date and event and names and then put it all together and create a picture. That's not me. So, if you're looking for an anti-war voice that does that, I would go to antiwar.com, check out Scott Horton, check out the Dave Smiths. But that doesn't mean I don't think that we shouldn't have a conversation if you're not one of those people. I think we should all be engaging in this conversation. We just should know our place. My lane is not in foreign policy. I don't have a lot of that stuff, at the tip of my tongue that I can recall and defend, every, argument regarding a particular country or a particular world leader necessarily. So what am I going to do today? Well, I thought it might be useful to give a short and recent timeline of events just as a reminder to help ensure that people are informed at least of what the facts are, okay? But otherwise I'm going to try to avoid declarative claims necessarily about Trump, Netanyahu, or Masood. I think it's Pa- Pezeshkian. Kian, Pezeskian. I think it's Pezeskian, and that would be the Iranian president. So timeline. I hate doing this, but when I was doing the research, this just seemed to be the cleanest break. Um, so we'll start at October 7th, only for the purposes of trying to do a more recent timeline. But the reality is that the timeline for conflict in the Middle East goes well beyond that. So I'm only using that as a cutoff date just because that's where that's kind of a clean cutoff, at least as far as the conversation has been had. So just know that there is a lot that leads up to and goes into October 7th, right? Like this, it's not like just everything was peace and flowers and whatever. And then all of a sudden on October 7th, Hamas just said, you know what? Let's go get them for no particular good reason. And I'm not saying they had a good reason. I'm just saying it didn't start. History doesn't start on this date. I'm starting here just for the purposes of trying to be concise and talk about the more recent events. So on October 7th, you had Hamas. They attacked Israel and they killed about 1,200 people, took 250 hostages, and that triggered the Gaza war, and then proxy attacks by Hezbollah and the Houthis. Then on April 1st, you have Israel, and this is 2024. Israel bombs the Iranian consulate in Damascus, killing their senior IRGC officials. And then Iran, they vowed to retaliate. So then on April 13th, you have, and this is again 2024, so we're still in 2024. April 13th, Iran launches about 300 or so drones and missiles at Israel in Operation True Promise. Most of them are intercepted with very minimal damage. Then on April 19th, Israel conducts limited strikes on Iranian military sites in Isfahan. Iran downplays that and de-escalates. And then on July 31st, Hamas leader, I'm not even going to try to pronounce all these names necessarily. A Hamas leader is assassinated in Tehran hours after Hezbollah's Fuad Shukur, I guess I have to say that name, is killed in Lebanon. Iran blames Israel. Okay. So starting to heat up again, already heated up, but starting to heat up in this particular um, shortened timeline. October 1st, Iran fires 180 plus ballistic missiles at Israel, retaliating for the killings. Most of them were intercepted. 2 people were killed. October 26th, Israel's Operation Days of Repentance hits 20 Iranian military sites. Iran reports limited damage and plans a response. Right. So we're kind of like now back. There's already back and forth going on here, and talks about response. And this is back in 2024. Okay, February 2nd. Now we're into 2025, February 2nd. Trump opposes a joint U.S. Israel strike on Iran, but supports supplying Israel with military equipment for independent action. April 9th, Trump states that if military action is needed against Iran, Israel will lead with U.S. involvement. May 8th, Trump waves off Israel's plan to strike an Iranian nuclear site, favoring diplomacy to limit Iran's nuclear program. May 28th, Trump warns Netanyahu not to disrupt U.S. Iran nuclear talks, emphasizing diplomatic solution. June 6th, Trump declares Iran must stop uranium enrichment or face military action, expressing reluctance for strikes. June 9th, Trump praises Iran's negotiators, but warns of dire consequences if nuclear talks fail after discussing with Netanyahu. June 12th, Trump warns of potential massive conflict in the Middle East, ordering non-essential U.S. personnel to evacuate. And then again on June 12th, Israel launches airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities infrastructure, escalating the conflict. Those might have been out of order, but they're the same day. June 13th, Trump claims he knew of Israel's strikes on Iran, calls them very successful, and urges Iran to negotiate a nuclear deal. June 13th, Israel's Operation Rising Lion targets Iran's nuclear sites, missile factories, and military bases, killing senior IRGC commanders and 224 people in total. June 13th to 14th, Iran retaliates with missile and drone attacks on Tel Aviv and Haifa. I think it's Haifa, killing 13 Israelis. Israel strikes Iran's energy infrastructure. June 14th, Trump describes Israel's attack as excellent and says Iran's failure to make a deal led to the strikes. June 15th, Trump says U.S. is not involved in Israel's strikes, but notes it's possible the U.S. could join, rejecting Israel's plan to assassinate Iran's supreme leader. June 15th, Iran fires missiles at Haifa, killing 4. Israel hits Tehran's foreign ministry and Iranian military sites, closing both nations' airspaces. June 16th, that's yesterday, Trump urges Tehran's evacuation, citing Iran's refusal to sign a nuclear deal, and expresses optimism for peace via Truth Social. So this is like crazy complicated. And then today, Trump seeks a real end to Iran's nuclear program, considers sending senior officials to meet Iran, and then denies leaving the G7 early for a ceasefire deal. So, like, apparently he's saying, like, hey, I left for some other reason. So that's kind of a short version of the more recent events. And it's kind of interesting. And I'm kind of going to be, this probably will be a shorter episode, like, for real. I mean, normally I say that and then it ends up not being, but I think it will be for real. Um, because I don't have a lot of thoughts on it, because honestly, I think there's still a lot of unknowns, and the timeline just looks to me to kind of be somewhat unclear. But then again, there are some interesting things that I'll know. So I guess the big question that we have here is, did Trump play Iran? So, like, I saw some commentary where, like, the rift between Trump and Netanyahu was fake, and that he was, doing some of these things, faking, faking it, the deal, not the deal, but the negotiations to lull Iran into complacency so that Israel could attack. And that's certainly possible. It seems to be, from what I can tell, really largely coming from this article here in the Times of Israel. And let me zoom in on that so you guys can read it a little bit. So here's this article, and it says, report U.S. helped lull Iran into belief no attack was imminent. It says the U.S. participated in a massive campaign to lull Iran into thinking an attack was not going to happen immediately, Channel 12 reports. U.S. President Donald Trump said Thursday that an Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear sites, quote, could very well happen, end quote, but advised against it, saying the possibility of a deal was, quote, fairly close, end quote, if Tehran compromises on its atomic ambitions in ongoing talks with the U.S. U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, said in an interview yesterday that Israel Israel was unlikely to attack Iran without a green light from Washington. So this seems to kind of point to, hey, President Trump is in on it, or he's, you know, playing games with Iran, like telling them one thing, but then, doing something else. The interesting thing about this is, one, this is this is a news site, right? So it's like, okay, how accurate is it? And I don't have any particular, I don't have any background into the Times of Israel as to how accurate they are when it comes to these kind of articles. But what I find interesting is that there's like, if you go through the timeline, like which we just did, if you walk through it, it seems to me that one possibility is that, yes, Trump is playing games and just playing pretend, but he's secretly assisting another country in their attack. On the other hand, I'm like, is it possible that there's another angle that maybe, because the ruse angle has not yet really been confirmed by the Trump administration, and it really seems to only come from the Times of Israel again. So, however you see them in terms of objectivity, but it seems possible that maybe Trump is trying to broker a deal with Iran while simultaneously remaining loyal to Israel, right? Because if you look at that timeline, it's like, and you look at some of the commentary coming from the comments coming from Trump, it's like, hey, this was an excellent strike. Hey, you guys need to come back to the table. And it's kind of like a weird thing, right? Like, why would you, I was trying to think about it. I was like, why would you say that? Why would you say that was an excellent strike or whatever? And then at the same time say, better come to this table so we can sit down and have a conversation. It seems like the time for conversation is now over once missiles start getting lobbed at each other. And so then the only thing I can think of this is that perhaps again, Trump does really want to broker peace, but at the same time is like maybe not giving a full green light to Israel, but saying like, look, if you got to do this, then you have to do this. We have your back. He speaking on behalf of the country, the United States, as president, of course. So he might say, "Well, we've got your back if you do this, but I would prefer if you didn't do this. I would prefer if you don't do this. If you can hold off on this, I'm still working on trying to get Iran." And then going to Iran and saying, "Look, you guys need to make a deal, and I'm willing to work on making that deal." That's what it seems like to me. So I want you to listen to this exchange between Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson. So I thought this was kind of interesting. We'll put this up on the screen here. So let's do that. Hold on for a second.
Incentives to pull the U.S. in.
All right, hold on. Let's make this a little bit. Let's make this a little bigger here. There we go. All right, so there we go. All right, so this is, and I think this is on like the Trump War Room or something like that. So this is Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon talking. So go ahead and listen.
So profound. I guess if I could just say one political thing, the watching Donald Trump, who of course you know very well, who I think at core is sincere about peace.
Big time.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Big time. I mean, that's real. Watching him done so wrong, the lies. Oh, he knew all along. The peace process was fake. Steve Witkoff was playing along. That is a lie. That's a lie. I know. That's a lie. Those guys meant it.
Bald-faced lie.
It's a total lie. And all these people that Mark Levin and all of the minions who are running cover for a foreign government, they're all telling that same lie. And I feel for President Trump, and I don't know this, I'm just guessing, but at this point, I feel like he just has to kind of roll with it. What do you say? You don't want to get in an argument about that right in the middle of a war.
No, I think he reiterated.
And so I think that's a very interesting point. You have to pick your battles. And so it's not clear to me exactly that Trump is indeed your typical warmonger. As we've seen in the past, like George W. Bush and whomever else. I think it's possible that he is like, look, I will support this ally and I'm not, I'm going to try to restrain him, but perhaps he's not putting a whole lot of effort into it. And at the same, and maybe that's a negotiating tactic. And I'm not I'm not engaging in the whole he's doing 4D chess. Okay. I'm just saying perhaps he means it. And perhaps the situation that we're in does not make it easy. And so he has to make choices. And the choice he's potentially making is saying, like, okay, we're still going to, because if you're supporting Israel, right, um, then that gives them certain amount of latitude. If you say, yep, we're going to support you, and you can support somebody and at the same time say, don't go too far, and that wouldn't be my choice, but that may be the choice that Trump is making. So I'm just kind of pointing out that it just doesn't seem clear to me exactly which side he's on. And I know people are kind of like, oh, he's totally anti-war, and oh, he's totally in on it. And I'm not sure. And I think this is worth having that conversation. Now I noticed I saw a comment that I thought was kind of interesting. Where did it go here? Uh, yes. So time surfing alien points out. He says Netanyahu's made it pretty clear on more than one occasion that he won't stop until Palestine is gone. And I don't disagree with that. I'm not necessarily trying to say what Netanyahu's motives are. I'm just saying, what are Trump's motives exactly? And now I didn't vote for him, but a lot of people did vote for him, and they voted for him explicitly because he was, talking about ending forever wars. Okay. And I was skeptical, and I remain skeptical until I see it. Right. But perhaps that was true. So let's continue listening.
Last night that we got to get back to the peace part. They got to lay down the
they're
guns.
lying about him. He sincerely, even now, he sincerely believes, whether he's right or not, I can't say, but that this could be a predicate to a peace deal, what we're seeing now. He really thinks that and wants that. And the other side is just like, no, a peace deal is immoral.
It's the other side, but the other side also has the apparatus here. This is what happened
in
Ukraine,
the U.S.
when Ukraine attacked.
Yes.
When Ukraine attacked, we still haven't asked Ratcliffe, was the CIA involved? That there's zero probability Ukraine could attack that deep into Russia without some involvement. Here, the exact same thing. Why was Tulsi Gabbard not invited to the Camp David meeting all day?
You know why?
Why Tulsi Gabbard still to the American public has said the last public statement is that the program was not back up and running, and now we have from Bibi by himself on Fox by Brent Baer that the thing was 12 to 13 months away. It wasn't this weekend.
I know,
and this is by his own thing. And we also know that it was a decapitation, as we said on Friday. It wasn't just about the nuclear program; it's a decapitation of total leadership. So this is a total regime change. Which, by the way, you may have a plan for regime change, is fine, but you got to bring the American people along. Let me go back.
By the way, I said that publicly last week. This is the point of this is regime change. I know everyone involved. I know.
Right. So I think he's probably correct. This is about regime change. Very similar to the comment that I just read a moment ago where Netanyahu said, hey, look, we the goal here is that Palestine be gone. And so I think it's possible. And again, I'm speculating, and I'm trying to be very careful about saying anything definitively, but at the same time, trying to kind of work out what are all the things that I'm seeing and reading and hearing, and just trying to say, okay, what is possible? What is, what can we be hopeful for? And maybe it's true that Trump really does want peace. Maybe it's true that he would rather do a deal, because I find it interesting that in the midst of this conflict, still, you keep seeing, hey, let's come back to the table. Let's have a conversation. And it would seem to me that if we were just going to go with whatever Israel wanted, then perhaps that's not what we'd be seeing. We would not be seeing like, oh yeah, please come back to the table, because we wouldn't need to. We'd come up with some other thing, to kind of pretend like we weren't involved or whatever. So it's not clear to me. Anyway, let's continue listening to the rest of their stuff here.
I'm telling the truth. I have no weird motive here at all. I don't hate Israel. I'm not.
Plus, you know the players, and you went
know the players personally.
And you know the Iraq situation.
This isn't a regime change effort, and why not just say that? But you're a Holocaust denier for saying that. Well, stop. Let's have a rational conversation about what our aims are here.
And this is kind of what I'm trying to do here. Is say, let's have a rational conversation. Maybe not about our aims so much as but what does the evidence tell us? What can we know, and what kind of things can we not know just yet? And like I'll tell you right now, I think that even though Israel is considered an ally of the United States, that we still have very distinct foreign policy goals. And I think that you have to juggle them if you're a world leader. And you have to say, all right, here's our policy, or here's our goals. Here are their goals. Let's figure out where they overlap. Let's figure out how we're going to do this. And one of the, and when you have a friend, like just think of it this way. If you have a friend that you really, really like and you're really, really supportive of, chances are you're not just going to stop being their friend because they're doing something stupid. And you might say, okay, well, we're going to stick with you. And a lot of people have gotten themselves, like, just taking it down to the individual level here. A lot of people have gotten themselves in trouble by giving too much support to their wayward friend, right? Like, I've seen this happen over and over and over. And nobody is like, I've never really seen anybody express how that wouldn't play out similarly on a national level. Like, hey, you've got this friend, they're doing actions that you don't necessarily agree with, but you're still going to remain their friend, which ultimately means you get dragged into their issues, right? So it happens on an individual level. I believe it totally happens on a national level.
And maybe you can convince me that we need to support a regime change war in Iran. Tell me how that plays out in a country of 90 million people. Have you thought it through? Do you even care? And the answer is no. We have a economic and political and demographic crisis in Europe because of U.S.-backed, Israel-backed
Syria
wars in the Middle East.
Yeah.
That's what's destroyed Europe, where my ancestors came from.
Okay, so I think he's right. I think a lot of these conflicts are from U.S. backed or supportive issues. And so you look and you say, well, the U.S. has a large amount of power in the world. And a lot of it is, to what extent are we willing to exert that power? And what are the consequences for doing that? And that's another interesting comment here. Trump needs to treat Netanyahu like he did Zelensky. If you don't want peace, we aren't going to support you. I think that's correct. And why we wouldn't do that, I can't speak to. I don't know. And it's okay to say, I don't know. Like, it's okay. I hate when people get on the internet and they act like they're an expert in everything. I'm like, it's okay just to be like, yeah, I don't really know a lot about this topic. I don't know a lot about foreign policy. I don't know a lot about the workings of the United States and Israel. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't have an opinion, because at the end of the day, if the United States is getting involved, then I should be able, I should have some level of opinion. My opinion is, number one, I don't think there's a sufficient amount of information for me to necessarily support or oppose the president in this particular instance. There are some things that look concerning to me, but then there are also some things where I'm like, I don't know, that may, depending on what his actual motives and his goals are. And I think that comment was correct. It would be nice if we saw something very clear, kind of like what we saw with President Trump and Zelensky, where he's like, "Look, you don't have the cards here," or whatever comment that he made that went kind of viral. Something similar, and say, "Look, we've been supportive of you, but you need to knock this off. This is unacceptable, and you will lose our support over this." Maybe Trump is being more diplomatic than that. Maybe he will always support Israel. Seems to me that would be the case, right? So this is where I am now. Speaking of Netanyahu, this other video I thought was interesting, and this is why I find the whole conversation not as clear as I would actually like it to be. So let me play this clip here.
It's Tel Aviv, tomorrow it's New York.
Pause that for a second. I don't know why these are so small. Let me zoom that in. There we go. Okay, let's listen to it.
I understand America first. I don't understand America dead.
Okay, so that's a very interesting comment. Like, I understand America first. I don't understand America dead. Well, I don't know what you mean by that exactly, but for me, I don't look at it as if if we decide that we don't want to be a part of something, that automatically signs our death warrant. It's nice rhetoric, but I'm going to need more than just some rhetoric. It's a nice little pithy way of saying it, but I need more.
What these people want. They chant death to America. So we're doing something that is in the service of mankind, of humanity.
Okay, so again, more rhetoric, propaganda, in my opinion, and saying like, "Oh, we're doing a service." Like you should be thanking us for what we're doing. Well, maybe, but maybe not, because again, you know, this seems more like regime change on behalf of Israel as opposed to anything beneficial to the United States. And Netanyahu or anybody else hasn't really made the case, as we saw Tucker saying. He was like, look, if you want a regime change, which he would oppose and I would oppose, then make an argument for it. Now, your argument, it sounded to me like Tucker was saying, hey, if you make an argument, you might get me on board. Well, I can tell you right now, getting Tucker on board will probably be easier than getting me on board, because I just don't believe in regime change. Like, no, stay out of other people's countries. Learn to play nice with your neighbors. And that's part of the argument, of course, right? Is like, oh, well, they want to destroy us. And it's almost like we got to destroy them before they do it to us. This is why everybody's like, oh, well, we're taking them out because of their nuclear program that they've got going on. And then you've got other people that are like, what nuclear program? This doesn't even make any sense. So again, for the regular citizens, this is all problematic because there's simply a lot of information that we don't have in order for us to make the most informed decision of what we expect our leaders to do. So let's continue listening.
It's a battle of good against evil. America should and does stand with the good. That's what President Trump is doing, and I deeply appreciate his support.
John Carl joins me now. So, John, what else did he say about President Trump and how he wants the U.S. to play a role here, or did he?
Well, look, he praised President Trump over and over again in this interview. He knows that he needs the United States support, at least in terms of doing what the U.S. is doing now, which is helping Israel defend itself from those retaliatory attacks from Iran. So it was all couched in a thank you, President Trump. You've been Israel's best friend, but he made it clear that he would like to see more. He didn't come out and directly say it in those ways, but what you heard, what you played right there, I understand America first. I don't understand America dead. He is really speaking to those in the Trump movement, those in the MAGA movement who are adamantly opposed to the United States getting involved in another Middle East conflict. And as you know, Kira, there are some prominent voices.
Yeah, so he goes on to say some of the names, and we'll continue playing that here in just a second. But I think you can consider this in two ways. Netanyahu's making an appeal to Trump's base and ultimately providing cover for Trump in order to help reel back in some of the voices on his side. Or Netanyahu is making an appeal to America and Trump at the same time, right? Mostly through America. Like, if you get, politicians have a tendency to, not always, but pretty consistently, go by public sentiment. So if all of a sudden all of America was like, hey, you got to protect Israel, and if we have to go to war with Iran, then so be it. Well, then I believe that your politicians are likely to be like, see, this is what the American people want. But if Americans were widely opposed to it, then they would also say, well, this is what America wants. We got to stay out. However, when you have a split, well, then you've got to get people on one side or the other. And so it's unclear to me whether Netanyahu is trying to bring people back over to the pro-Israel side in order to, again, provide cover for Trump and then, basically assist him, or basically, in a sense, indirectly direct Trump through the American people. So it's unclear to me what exactly is happening. This is why I say, like, It's okay to say you don't know. I don't know. We can talk about some things. We can point some things out and say, this is kind of interesting. This is curious. This doesn't make sense. But for me, when I look at the timeline, when I look at all the commentary, I'm like, what doesn't make sense to me is simultaneously saying, hey, great missile strike, come back to the table, right? Like that doesn't make sense to me, except if we play it like, we're going to support you, we're going to back you up. Please don't go too far, right? Please hold off on this. Do the least amount that you can, right? I think if we're playing it that way, then perhaps, and perhaps that's the angle that Trump is actually going for. And it's not really, and again, not 4D chess. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about simple calculation. Like, look, we got your back, but try to let us work it out here. Let's continue.
Supporters, outside advisors of Donald Trump who are saying, don't get involved. The United States can't be involved. You campaigned against forever wars. People like Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk. Those are, close supporters of Donald Trump who are saying that they don't think the United States should be involved in this. And Netanyahu, it seemed to me, by using their language, I understand America first. I don't understand America dead. Was speaking directly to Donald Trump and to his supporters who are critical of what Israel is doing.
Okay. So from these clips and then just other clips that I've seen, like I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to say perhaps Trump still means it, but not as much as I would like. He means it in the sense like, hey, we're going to do our best to stay out of it, but if push comes to shove, we're supporting Israel. We'll be in on it too. And to some degree, we already are in on it, right? Like we've been assisting with knocking down or shooting down some of their some of the missiles that are coming over. We've provided material support and financial support, and and to some degree public support as well, right? On the other hand, again, like you had Trump calling out, and saying, "Hey, get out of Tehran if you can." There's like how many, like 10 million people, 20 million people. There's millions and millions of people there, and I saw some video footage of allegedly showing that people were you know lined up on the highway trying to get out. Right. So like, what was the purpose of that? So again, it seems unclear to me. I think it's okay to not know. I don't think Trump is playing 4D chess, but I'm optimistic that Trump still wants to end wars, but he may not go about it the way that I would prefer. And so we will just have to wait and see. I'm going to get to this. I don't think there's any other comments really so much. I do like this. Israel needs to handle this without the USA from Time Surfing Alien. I agree. I think that at the end of the day, everybody has to learn to play nice with their neighbors. And the one mistake that the United States does make, in my opinion, is continuing to back people, even if they're doing things that are immoral or inappropriate, or maybe they are appropriate, and we just say, "Look, you need to figure this out on your own." Because as long as the United States is backing a country or anybody, then it gives them a little bit of boldness and leverage to do things that they might not otherwise do. This was part of the argument that people made when it came to Ukraine. We're like, look, as long as we're providing all this support and assistance, well, then it gives them reason to keep going and to say no to possible negotiations. And a lot of people that were more pro Ukraine, they would say, well, what do you want? Do you want them just to give up their land to Russia? And my argument was just like, maybe if that's what they choose, right? And people are like, well, so that means you could just run in and take over land and force them to give it. Okay, again, if Ukraine and Russia make a deal and they're both willing to abide by that deal, why should I argue with it? Why should I go, no, 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 you shouldn't be giving up that property? Their property. They can make the decision. And if they feel that's in their best interest, then why not? Right? Like that, and if that ends up being, reducing the number of deaths from a war over it, then I consider that to be a net positive. Same thing in Israel and the Middle East. Like, come to the table, and people might say, "Well, you think Israel?" I think two parties or more should figure out how to make a deal so that they can stop fighting and live in peace. And if that means giving up some land, or if that means giving up claim to land, or whatever, then perhaps that's a good thing. Because at the end of the day, I would prefer not to see death and destruction. In the same way that I don't want to see death and destruction in our streets, from protest and riots and stuff like that. I don't want to see it on the world stage. Nothing good comes, right, from death and destruction on large scales. Now, when I say that, I mean, let me temper that, I guess, because the counter argument would be things like, well, look at Japan, and look at them now. They're super duper peaceful, and we work with them. Okay, yeah, I get that. I'm not saying that nothing can't nothing. I'm not saying nothing good can come after a negative event. What I'm saying is, like, I don't think that a negative event has to happen in order for something good to come to be the end result. We can look for options and basically have our cake and eat it too, by saying, what can we do to minimize death and move forward peacefully? That should always be the goal. And we should work our asses off to get there. So anyway, that's all I got to say. Yes, Time Surfing Alien points out Netanyahu doesn't want peace. That is my assessment as well. And this is why I think, going back to the earlier comment and saying, hey, knock it off or we're out. Right? I think that should be the U.S.'s position. I don't think that the U.S. position should be, okay, guys, kind of knock it off, but if you don't, we'll still back you up, which is what I do think Trump is doing right now. I think I'm optimistic that it's that. It could be more than that. It could be that he's just like, do what you got to do, and while you're doing that, I'll see if I can't get them to budge a little bit, right? Or maybe it's as some people are claiming. Maybe Trump completely fabricated, potential deals and negotiations just to give cover to Israel. And if that's the case, then I'm with a lot of the other anti-war voices. We should impeach him, and we should punish our president for that, because I don't think that's in the interest of America. Because all that does is that pisses people off, and that leads to us getting dragged into a conflict, either an actual full-scale conflict or at least terrorism from organizations that want to get payback. So I think the U.S. needs to stay out, but I'm willing to kind of sit on my hands a bit and say, well, let's see how this plays out, and then once we have more confirmation of things, then we can determine whether or not we need to, pat Trump on the back, toss him in Gitmo, if you will, or whatever. So anyway, not an exciting episode today. I just wanted to give some thoughts on it and mostly walk through and just kind of remind people of kind of like a little bit of the history, and then say, here's how we can have this conversation without trying to be definitive, and let people know, like, hey, you know what? You can have some thoughts on the matter without this being your wheelhouse, because for most people, this is not your wheelhouse. Right? I mean, there are some talking heads out there that have tons and tons of knowledge in their skulls, and they can pull it on command, and then develop a picture that they want to present. But I think we need to be weary of all of our talking heads, because they're all just they're going to lead you one direction or another. And I think we should. I think this is a time to stake our position and say, look, we're anti-war. Don't drag us in it, but also say, okay, what's going on here? What's happening? And then kind of somewhat take I don't want to say, I guess for lack of better words, wait and see approach. So that's where I am. Folks, I'm going to head on out. And just to let you know, Thursday and Friday, I have those days off. So I'm planning to do some premium shows in the after my regular show. And what are they going to be about? I don't know yet. And I might have one Saturday as well. I'm working on 2 guests right now, trying to get 2 guests scheduled. One of them will most likely be in the evening. That will not be a premium show. That's a local guest. The other one is not a local guest. Talking to her and seeing about getting a show together. She's a little apprehensive about doing a live stream. And I said, you know what? Maybe we'll do it a Rumble Premium. And then that'll kind of take some of the stress and anxiety out, since it won't be full on public and everybody can jump in and chime in. And then, so anyway, so that may happen. So we'll see. I'll let you guys know. But yeah, I am definitely planning to do some premium shows Thursday and Friday, since I have those days off and I don't have to worry about time. So I will do that after the show and we'll figure out what we're going to talk about. But for now, we're going to head out. So have a good one, folks. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. You can also become part of the community by heading over to libertydad.locals.com. Remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.